Well, YouTube, we're going to look at cars. Definitely. That is what we were going to see. We had a lot of mail calls this week and also a couple of local finds. We'll review that as well. But a lot of these vehicles, the hunt is out there. A lot of people are back at it and got to stay safe. So, again, not too much visiting of the locations, but there's been a lot of great releases online and they've been keeping their prices steady. And locally, very, very high competition. Many of you probably experienced that anyway. Sometimes we got to get around all that and go online. And a lot of things, too, if you're not lucky enough to live by a place that, does online and has a storefront. Very rare nowadays for Diecast. The only way to get some of these releases is online. And we're definitely going to talk about a very special casting during this episode. But let's start out with some Auto World. Really, really good stuff. They keep bringing out the best liveries on these square bodies. And I'm becoming a fan of the Wrangler. For some reason, when I see them in person, I always want to buy one. So I've been keeping up with it. Though this one is another 2020 release, 2. This is version B that I found. It's funny, there's not too many facts that you can share about these vehicles, but every time they do a new release in a new color, they have to write something. So they're probably running out of stuff to talk about. I thought that was funny. There was a lot of actually trim levels. So like they'd use this vehicle, but they'd have all sorts of special editions for the Wrangler. So for subject material, different paint schemes, they have a lot to work with, but the vehicle basically stays the same. There's no big changes in the drivetrain or anything from these editions. It's always about trim levels. Alright, so let's look at the model silver. I was surprised, actually, the solid paints they've been using, like the blue and the black, that hides a lot of the detail. There's a lot of fine detail in this casting from Auto World, and it becomes evident when you see it with silver. And silver really lays as a paint in general. Most metallics, especially silver, lay pretty good. They have a tension, surface tension value that really seeps into all the cracks. As long as there's a good surface for it to go against, either a primer or a prepped cast. So I don't think they primer these things, they just paint them. But you can see the difference. And look, see the door line? We'll look at a thicker casting or a thicker paint. It might not show up as much. I'll try to get the reflection on it on camera than it does in person. But you can really see the sharpness. You can see how it gets hidden with the hinges on the door. That's kind of a place where you can see the difference. But also you can follow the mold lines very well. That was just the black one. Of course, if you get most of these colors, you can have your own Jeep dealership. They'll be all the same year, different colors. Take a zoom. Maybe that'll help us identify the difference. See how thick that is. This is a Sahara. And I think this one was Rubicon. So they have changed trim levels. Wheels are the same. They really didn't really tool new wheels. Jeep probably had a dozen different aluminum wheels that they went through over the years with this body style. There's a lot of different trim packages with this vehicle. Tires are great. They're a little narrow, but they look very good. The application in the flat black again, it's spotty. You can kind of pick it up on the blue one. You can see they don't paint under the fender. But they do a decent job. Again, this is very tiny. And for the most part, it's in the right place. 3.6 liter by this time. So this is an 18 Wrangler, isn't it? Yeah. So it's their latest version. It's a 24 valve V6. And the Wrangler would be one of 8816. They're starting to learn their lesson. They're producing more square body vehicles than anything else in the sets now. They realized how popular they were. So I'm glad that Auto World did that. Kind of alleviate some of the hoarding and the pressure on these vehicles. I commend them for not just being like M2 and saying, you know, everything gets a certain amount. Wow. So there's that Wrangler. Let's look at square bodies, my favorite. So this was one of the painful things I had to do, was go buy these online. Typically, I can catch Auto World when it hits the area, and I can sometimes get lucky. At least get one of the versions, whether it be version A or version B, in person, and try to fill in the rest online. Well, no luck. I did find the new Chevy Silverado, which we went over last time, but the square bodies are extremely elusive. And like I was saying, people are coming out more. So we got two. Let's look at version A. I think this is probably my favorite. It's a really funky color. But I like vehicles that remind me of, you know, the true 70s. Back then when this was very common. You know, this would not only be on your car, but in your kitchen. That color. So this is a 1977. It's got the Chevy Rally wheels, which Greenlight does very, very well. We'll look at this. I actually opened this one up. There's your information on that. Again, this is kind of like the Wrangler, where the fact they have a lot to... Well, they kind of run out of stuff to talk about when you do the same vehicle over and over again. Although, it goes from about 73, and hopefully they'll do the 80s versions of these, and go up to about 87. It would be nice for Auto World to do a long bed. But, no such luck. I have not seen anything that they will do something like that. They'll probably do something with like a cap. I bet they'll put accessories on this vehicle, like a bed cover or something. Greenlight has kind of been successful keeping their toolings looking fresher by adding those type of low-key accessories, and they've done it already with their newer stuff. You know, things that have only been out once or twice, they're already putting accessories on them. Really exceptional. That's very rare. I mean, you wouldn't really see this. I mean, even in 1977, a truck painting like this, I mean, it would be around, but it would be very seldom. So it's, you know, it's great to have it in scale. Root beer brown, cream, yellowish cream, two-tone. Let's zoom in on it. We've been over this casting many times before, so let's just kind of soak in the details of this particular version. I guess this is the first time they do a 77 grill. They talk about, you know, the differences in the grill. I mean, General Motors was able to stamp basically the same metal, just add different trim. Grill was an easy thing to change. It was only made out of plastic, so they could tool that up fairly quickly. They got same motor. They haven't done anything recently to the engine. So this is Chevy's push rod V8. Really, really nice, strong motor. Runs many, many miles. Truck blocks were very exceptionally good in the 70s. A lot of things were changing in the car industry. The trucks were for the few things through the 70s that stayed kind of consistent. I think in 77, a small block or a big block Chevy still had more main bolts than the sedans, so they tended to have a longer life. And I'm talking about the bottom end, how the crankshaft gets attached to the block. There was more mains for the journals. This is another truck, you know, they do a really good interior, so it's like that tan bucket seat, which again, a very highly optioned truck. wouldn't necessarily come with buckets and a console very often. So it's kind of a cool, gussied up version of what would normally be the majority of them. A little bit of overspray there on the tail light. The registration was unusual. The Alabama registration. You can see, I mean, the detail on the trim, which it was stainless type trim, and then they had a black band in the center of it. So you could see that they replicated that there, and that's pretty good. Bumpers are great on these. And of course, Autoworld's really good deep casting for their chassis. If you were to take your time, take this vehicle apart and paint this chassis and detail it, all the different parts with a brush, I mean, it would look pretty good. I feel, now that I've kind of thought about this for a minute, I mean, they have a dual purpose. They carry on the tradition of making model kits, which really were the only way you could get something like these cars accurate. Most tooling for toys or that type of stuff, like this type of tooling, really could not cost effectively, I'd say, replicate this like these people can do now and have such an accurate thing. So really, the reason that, you know, Autoworld is interesting and the way the construction is, they really kind of, now that I've kind of studied these vehicles, they kind of have that model kit mentality with making these die casts. That's kind of why this, if you pull out a promo, so a promotional model, the ones that you'd get at a dealer, and I'll just pull one off the shelf. This is one of my Chevys. Let's put a brown one so you know. So 1/25th scale. So this is a promo that I've detailed, so I painted it and stuff. Might have shown this truck before. The construction of this truck is pretty much the same as this. And they do that on other premium brands. But you could see, even though this is a one-piece chassis, they took the time to mold everything in, even though metal axles were going through it, etc. So really, if I was to detail the underside, it would get pretty good. Same thing. It's the same construction. One-piece floor plan, two-piece body, separate tailgate, just like this one. And they paid attention to doing the chassis. A lot of vehicles, they're kind of going to be flat plans, you know, or there'd be a Hot Wheels type where they don't care. I just like, you know, a 360-degree view of Autoworld. There's always detail for the most part. So I think maybe this is part of their thinking. Who knows? Maybe I digress. I could be taking a stab at it, but after seeing so many castings over the years from them, and then also the way they approach painting the vehicles and how they detail them, there's a tradition there that kind of goes back more to the model industry than it does to diecast manufacturers. So that's just my 2 cents. And all I'm pointing out is that I like it. I like that's different, and I like they're doing it their own way, sort of. I know they had to get rid of the boxes, which a lot of people don't like, but it happens. I mean, they still got a nice card art, very thick, and this is less packaging overall. So I mean, you got to look at it like it's less waste. There's always could be some of that left. So what we're gonna do? Let's cut this open, and then I'll show you on camera again what I'd usually do. On these Autoworlds, I'm debating whether I should keep the plastic with it, because it is a way to put these cars back, and these are a little bit more fragile, even though they're very difficult. They're very tough. I don't know, I was about to say much more difficult to damage, but they're still delicate in the grand scheme of things. And so, like, for instance, Hot Wheels can kind of be packed together as long as you put a towel around them or something like that. But these vehicles I don't feel comfortable. And, of course, having the box, if you ever need to remind yourself what issue this was, etc., it'll have all your information on that card. So this almost looks like an Ultra Red, and if you don't know what that is, it's a very small limited number chase piece. Either version can be chases, but the red they use is extremely close, and it's kind of it's almost like a joke, because, you know, if there was two-tone with these reds, it would be the white. And the only difference between really this and Ultra Red is this base would have been painted, of course, and you'd have a white interior. But they've done vehicles like this. I think the Ultra Red of this version is very extremely close to this. The red is probably a lighter shade. You can see in the light. So this says Cheyenne 10. So that's awesome. And you can see black walls instead of white wall. And that was a Silverado package, I believe. Yeah, so you can see the difference. Bonanza. I think it was Bonanza and then Silverado is what that card art said. Again, another small black Chevy in there. Let's open this up. This is the first time I've taken this out. Real stiff. Yeah. Extremely stiff. So, same. Nothing changed. Drop down tailgate. A little chip in it. So, that's very rare for Auto World. Usually don't see chips in their paint. At least the ones I've seen. And I got a few. The rallies look really good without the white walls. I mean, unfortunately, like I was saying, these tires are flexible. Maybe when they apply the white wall, the tire might not be seated correctly on the machine. That's the only thing I could guess as to why, because their tires are always round. So I'm thinking it's just the way the machine is lining up. Some of them come out good. It's just that, it's always one of the three or two of the four, or whatever they want to say, are messed up. Deep casting. We got a lot of stuff to cover, but I like looking at these Auto Worlds. Who doesn't? This ad's going to very much add to the square body collection. This hood needs a little correction. To address that later. Okay, so we looked at square bodies. We've seen them all, done them all. With those, pretty fairly up to date. There's a lot of special editions that I've been missing, but I get some of them. Okay, so let's go through some Greenlight. We got some Greenlight, and then we're going to get to the Land Rover. That thing is amazing. Really, really good. And we'll take a good look at that as well, so bear with me. Alright, let's look at the big and then go to the small. This is adding to my step van collection. This is the NYPD. It's also adding to the NYPD cars that I have. So it adds actually, and I had to pull out down one. We'll look at the comparison. There's a lot of tooled parts on this that are new. So they're going to use this as a law enforcement platform too for Greenlight. So they've basically showcasing the stuff that you'll be seeing. They might even have more things. And this part, this truck's part of a set of 3, so it's not a hobby exclusive. This will be on shelves. And these are the vehicles. Very generic, international yellow. So that's kind of interesting. And they got Gulf. Your Gulf people, you'll have a vehicle as well. Not too much to go over it, but if you haven't seen the differences yet, let's bring out a USPS vehicle, U.S. Postal Service. So, same wheels and tires. This one's painted gray, one's black, but the bumper. So this bumper is a new piece, and so is the guard, the grill guard. That's new. Also, they tooled a new rear door system. So we have the normal door that were on all the releases, and they have. You can see the issue I was having. We'll go over that in a minute. So, when it comes out of the package, and bear with me, you can see how time-consuming this looks. But suffice to say, this had tape on it from the factory. I'm going to see if that'll stay. Okay, so you can see extremely how fiddly that is. The doors open fine, everything's really narrow, but that's kind of how it was on the real truck. But they taped it because basically it turns into a mess. It kind of goes all over the place. And they might change that later, who knows. I'm going to leave it loose. It's not going to be a car that's going to be tossed around so much, so You know, if I wanted to display it open, I can. But yeah, we can take a look back there. So let's go through the process of opening the doors. And that's what they look like opened. Now the other thing that's really cool, so this van, you'd have personnel in the back too, so they did the step bumper, which I thought was awesome. Let's take a little zoom on it. The fidelity on even the bumper stickers, I mean, you can read that. So the amount of detail is great, and you can see in the zoom mode, you can see all the rivets that are on the truck. So I mean, all that detail is great, especially when you're zoomed in. I mean, if you light this correctly, put a little weathering on the truck, I mean, it could go very well to look very real. They did a good job. And they're depicting a highway patrol support unit. And this would serve many functions for the department. This side, which actually is always obscured to you when you look at it in the package, which is funny because this is more interesting. It has the door open. Door doesn't work. We've been through that on the others. But it's a cool, it's a cool truck, I think. It's really interesting. I think it looks very nice to me. All right, well, let's look at another casting. So these two have been my favorites this year from Greenlight. I do like the Blazers, of course. Everybody likes those. Those are great. But for a total package, like I did on the other vans, this is superb. I think this looks amazing. They did a great job. This is part of running on MT Series 10. Let's look at the box. And your list of vehicles. So, really just wanted this one. Take a look at it real quick. We've been through this before. It's a highly accurate casting. They did take the time to make pretty deep panel markings for the doors and stuff. So even with thick paint, it looks very good. Nothing gets buried. These are a newer wheel they've been using, and it's very accurate. And their stance on this is pretty close to perfect too, which again, it's awesome. I like how they tampo windows. That adds a lot of detail, a lot of feeling of detail. No plates on the vehicle, so it's not registered. Complete Golf livery. Look at that. So this is a very light blue over dark and orange. So it looks white, but it's blue. And there is our serial. So 1585. There's probably a ton of these out there. And the interior is white with the black dash. Thought that was cool. So what year is this? It's saying it's a 68, basically the first year for that kind of body. I'd hope that thing, you know, with Club Wagon, it's funny, you think, oh, it's not carrying anything. Well, it is. It's carrying people. And when you think about how much people weigh once they add up in all the seats, you know, a lot of the vans like this would have been a 3/4 ton, so it would have been a heavier package because you're putting 10, 15, whatever, how many people you want to put in there. That's a lot of weight. So you're going to need the better axle suspension. You can probably have a V8 in it, which is another cool thing. So they're kind of made of a pretty cool hauler, especially empty. They'd be able to plow through. Definitely. One last thing. Let's see what it says. It's probably the Club Wagon again. Yeah. So, beautiful. Little cat hair. Beautiful, beautiful Greenlight. Very, very excited to have that vehicle in the collection as well. Alright, let's move on. This is an anniversary series. I can't remember if this is... It doesn't say hobby exclusive, but these are... You know, I haven't seen one in person. See, fewer of the retailers will have... Because it'll have a lot of lines, and some of these are more specialized, so you have to carry a little bit more sometimes to get these. So this one I got online, but it was a good price. 90 years of CHP. One of the best eras for Chevrolet. So, and also the best representation of the brick Caprice, the box Caprice, the 80s and late 70s downsized Caprice that they made. This car basically, like many of the long-lived American cars, really started its life in the early 70s under the full-size Chevy, and this was just kind of a, not a hacked-up version, but kind of a scaled-down version of the same vehicle. So, you know, this body retired in 96 with modifications, granted, but basically the same setup. Coil spring, live axle rear, coil spring, independent front suspension. And that's in the perimeter body frame, and that was the end of it. They did it for many years, basically almost unchanged. So we have some good tooling on this. We have the authentic push bar. This is very close to the CHP unit, what they would use. They had one very similar to that. If you look at this, it's almost exact. There might be a couple of differences on it. It's got a Jetsonic light bar like they used. And of course, Greenlight's fantastic Caprice casting. It's always amazing. Now, this exhibits something that I've seen prevalent in this casting, where it has a lean to it. It seems like the jig or whatever they're using to assemble it and stamp them in. And I haven't drilled one apart yet to know, but it's been putting the passenger side lower than the driver's side. Same with this. This is lower too on this side. Why that causes that, I don't know. It's easily flexible. You just have to reseat the base. There's your serial. You can see how that attaches there. The wheel covers, again, done excellent. And we got a little bit close up on the highway patrol there too. So pleased with this. This will go very well with the CHP cars. Got a glimpse of the interior there. It looks like it's the higher the Brome trim. I wish I had the pattern on the seats. That's kind of funny. It's a very small car. It's almost impossible to really get nuts about that. I can understand them reusing the interior. Headlights were done good too. That's how they looked in, what are they calling this car? An 89? Yeah. Basically, 89 was the best version for this vehicle, just because by this point it had fuel injection when you ran the 350 Chevy motor, and you had a really good transmission too. You had a really strong turbo hydromatic. I think it was 700 turbo. So, I mean, just good stuff. 4-speed automatic, very heavy duty brakes, cooling system, the whole 9 yards. And this is what ushered in Chevy. You know, that before Ford came back, because Mopar was dying in 89. 88, 89, basically the last year for the Diplomat Dodge that the CHP also used. So, that was a cool car for many reasons. All right, let's look at a really great vehicle. Get a little sip of water here. There's a lot to go over, but we'll try to make it as short as possible. Because this is a very iconic vehicle. They kind of told us about this tooling earlier in the year. Didn't do too many posts on it, and then finally it just hit at the retailers. So it started overseas, and I saw them listed. The overseas ones had the same price as the ones coming to the U.S. It's just that the shipping obviously wasn't a good bargain. But the people in the United States got them, and this is supposed to be, if you read the package, it says USA exclusive, but of course everybody should be entitled to enjoy these vehicles, of course. But it has a fairly low production number. And it's got kind of cool box art. But I took the box out because, and I don't know if I went over this with the last one, but they do basically have the same type of thing that this is in here. So if you can't kind of keep the whole thing together, the car will fit in here, and you're good to go. So, very, very ingenious. Alright, let's look at enough packaging, right? Okay. So this color, Land Rover had a color for it. They call it, I don't know if it's a nickname or some, so Sand Glow. It's like a mustard, but flat. Although in real life, I don't know, it was flat. I've seen these cars and it kind of looked like it had shiny paint, but I don't know. This is probably a version, not 30 or anything, so, when it started the journey. And this is a replica of the car that won for the year. So this is the 1989 Land Rover Defender 110. 110 being the longer wheelbase with the 4 doors. There was also a 90. And they had those in competition too in the early 80s for the Camel Trophy. Then they had the Range Rover. So they kind of went from Range Rover to 90s, back to Range Rovers, then they went to Defenders, and then they went to the 110s, and then they finally ended up with the new Discoveries before it kind of faded away in the late 90s. The Brits, and I think the United States as well, one of the few countries that won it, but also only won it one time. So this represents the only time that the British were the champions. It was in 1989. And I actually saw something online. I did a little bit more research. The drivers of this vehicle own it now. They were able to purchase it back. It was a very serious thing. This was almost like the Olympics of off-roading, but with amateurs, because you could not be a professional driver to run in the race. It always had to be amateurs, and there was competitions in each country that participated. So there was a huge funnel of people. Once the word got out and how prestigious this became, people would compete to be whittled down to only 2 people per vehicle. I was thinking it was 4, but it's only 2. And there was a lot of cooperation because my memory story, there's a lot of guys all over the place. Well, they would also help each other. It wasn't quite all man for himself. It was more about, the finish line than the competition. It was kind of like who finished it. It was very interesting. I didn't really remember most of how it became. 1980 was the first year it ran, and the very, very other good thing about this was they would never be in the same location twice, it looked like. Basically all around the world, Southeast Asia, Central Asia. They had Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, places. They did it in Australia one year, Siberia. I mean, just all over. It was awesome. You couldn't handicap anything because it was always a new adventure, and it was very prestigious because you were carrying your country's flag. So Union Jack is on this one. This is 1/64 scale, but it has the same details as a 118. They even molded the tools. You got a shovel and a pickaxe. Look at all the equipment on the roof. This is all fixed. It doesn't come off. They also paid attention to detail of all the markings. Let's get this backed up slightly. And they went to an extreme. So, no misplacement of any of the decals or the tampo work. Camel trophies on top. Union Jack is where it needs to be. My fingers are too fat. Let's do this. The iridescent paint for the bulbs and the lenses. It's got perfect detail with basically no flash, and this would be your little treads that you'd put on the ground to get your vehicle over something. Mostly like soft ground, things like that. Or if you're winching on something, it provides stability. It even had the little position, the hold-ins for the. Everything is there. The scale of the tubing. They even angled the driving lights downward. Every detail. A lot of guys, even the good ones, they would leave those facing straight up because they didn't have to work in the angle of all that. It's just incredible. And very simple, basic vehicles. This vehicle was right after the war they developed these type of trucks. Because, they used the Jeeps for the most part until they were able to develop their own vehicle. Land Rover stepped in and became also a civilian vehicle. It's very well loved. very rugged. This is almost a culmination of that body. This, by this point, had a diesel engine and a 5-speed. And that's not basically it. They didn't have too much other stuff to go wrong. Everything was manual. There's your drivetrain. Everything is metal on the base, even these mud flaps. The tires are almost bordering on exquisite for 1/64th. But I mean, you have tread detail and no mold line, basically. Very, very nicely rolling. And you can see they paid attention to making a very thick axle hole and axle. And that really prevents these from being crooked when you assemble them. Very soft rubber. You can see the detail in the tires. It's incredible. Not a single smudge or mark. Nothing was broken. They're using their soft mirrors. Those are completely rubber. They have the snorkel, spare tire. And just everything is there. The livery, everything's perfect. It really is very good. The only thing I would say is when you compare it to other vehicles like this, and this was something that was throwing my eye off, was the fact that the openings are a little bit too big, and it seems like the door distance from here to here is too short. These did have relatively small windows on them, and there was a lot more body. So that was probably the only criticism I could find. Such a basic vehicle. Basically, all they did to it was give it more provision carrying ability. So the rack, they had a gas heater in them, I guess, because you can use them for sleeping and everything. And then they put snorkel on so it could ford a river or water crossing, and it vented the drivetrain so it wouldn't suck in mud and stuff. So they have to vent the differential and the transmission, things like that, because if it's under vacuum, it'll kind of basically suck everything in through the seals, and it's not good for it. So they just vent everything, but no big modifications. They weren't putting big exhaust kits and lift kits. Basically, they had good tires, but there was also a point from Land Rover to tell people that even in basically an unmodified form, the vehicle can do anything. So that was a big message for them. As well as smoking your Camels. You have to admit, you have to also like Camel cigarettes, I guess. What a great vehicle. I'm just amazing. I highly suggest you try finding one before they get sold out. Probably at the time of the publication of this, they might be darn close to it. Alright, well, it took a minute. I would have told people about it longer, but it kind of just got here. And I also wanted to kind of read up on everything, too. Well, we did look at some cars. We were able to look at mini GTs. Land Rover, Defender 110 4-door, and of course some other beauties as well. But they've been out before. This one hasn't. By the way, too, this comes in 3 flavors. It has the Camel trophy. It's got a Red Bull. And it's got a relatively stock-looking turquoise 110 as well with some surfboard on it. So I don't know if that's in the future. Or maybe I'll wait for something a little bit more sedate, maybe like a white one or something, because when I did see these in North America, and they were only here for a short time being imported because of regulations, and I don't want to keep this too long, but they would always be white with the white wheels. So if they make a white one, I'd be very extremely happy. All right, thank you for all your kind comments. Appreciate all the subscriptions and thumbs up. It's been wonderful. We got more cars coming. I'll probably do some bigger scales soon. But long live the Land Rover. Right? Am I right? I think so. Stay safe out there. Till next time.